Thank you for joining us for the How You Got Started podcast, dedicated to helping you find your passions by hearing stories from entrepreneurs that are living theirs. First, I want you to take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. Today, we're speaking with Karry Sawatsky, a death doula and death educator. Thank you so much for joining me today, Karry. Please tell me, what is a death doula?
So, a death doula is someone who companions the end of life, and that can be for a person who has a life limiting illness. It could be for their companions, so perhaps a caregiver, a spouse, an adult child. And we offer things like emotional support, physical support, spiritual support. And my particular niche is I offer mindset and I focus on spiritual care and really help to empower the person or their family through the end of life journey so that they're informed and they feel autonomous and in control of what's happening the best that they're able to.
Can you give me an example of someone that you've recently helped? Like, what did that look like?
Sure. So, first I'll share a client had described me as like a tour guide. So she said, in working with you, it was like you were a tour guide guiding our family through this city, this new city that we'd never been to. We didn't speak the language. We were all trying to stay together and arrive at our destination calmly. And you really helped get us from one stage to the other and helped keep us all together. And I think that really gives a good example and an understanding of how I helped hold a container for everyone to go through this rite of passage that most people haven't experienced, and certainly not experienced in a very deeply meaningful, healing, transformational way.
Mhm.
Often, death is experienced in with feelings of shock, with feelings of it being traumatic, um, there being a lot of unexpected events or occurrences or emotions. And so my role is essentially to help normalize the experience. I help to create a plan together with what their vision is for the end of life. Where do they want to be? Who do they want to have there? What would feel really supportive to them as a person and their unique interests and values? So often I'm really attuning to who the person is and what their needs are and drawing on my intuition to help bring about just the right experience for them.
Hmm. What are some of the ways that you help normalize that experience? Because personally, I know a lot of people that are absolutely terrified of death, um, or they don't want to die. What are some of the things you do to help people in that aspect?
So, some of the ways you can normalize death even before aging or illness is to do things like read about near death experiences, watch documentaries about the end of life, talk about what you want to have happen and don't want to have happen. Use the words death and dying with your dear ones. Also, the life cycles, looking at birth as a natural process and as natural as death is birth and birth is death, and even looking at the seasons, we naturally have the trees budding in the spring and coming into full bloom or in their full essence, and then going into a hibernation or some plants dying completely off. And that these are all natural parts of life and death, and you can't have one without the other.
Mm-hmm.
So when we acknowledge that and keep bringing that into our awareness, it really helps us to be more with death when that happens because we see it as a normal event and not as a failure of our healthcare system.
Mm-hmm. I know some people have gone through experiences where they've lost a loved one. And of course, when the person who has passed away is gone, I'm not there. I'm assuming they're not feeling any pain or having any emotions, of loss. But it's the people that are left on Earth, right? The people that are left here with that piece missing. That I think is the hardest part. I think actually the hardest part of life, or one of the hardest parts, is death. Would you think that is also the case, based on your experience?
Yeah, I'd love to speak to both those parts. So first, I want to talk about continuing bonds. So when someone is about to die or in planning for someone who is aging, planning in your own mind in preparation for their death, or someone has died and you want to still have that connection, there are ways you can continue your bond with them after they've died. And ways to do that are things like making a recipe that was one of their favorites, or maybe going to a place they used to love to go to, or you have memories of. It could be looking at photographs, or for example, I use the example, a personal one. My dad is still living, but he loves Formula One. And there's a type of dahlia, a flower, that is called a Grand Prix.
Mm.
And so when my dad passes, I will plant this particular type of dahlias so that I can stay connected with him. And I also have a sailboat little trinket on a necklace. And I think sailing's okay, but he really loves sailing. And so I have this necklace that helps me to feel connected to him even while he's living, and this will be something that I cherish after he's died.
Mm.
And there's also ways we can talk with children to help them to prepare to have the bond continued, or perhaps a child's grown up without a grandparent. You can bring memories alive by talking about who they were as a person, what they loved. So these are some of the ways that we can continue to have a bond with a person and plan to have a bond when their physical form isn't here for us to connect with.
Mm.
Death is one of the hardest things that we go through, and I think part of that is we live in a way that we don't accept death as something that will eventually happen.
Mm.
Intellectually, we know everybody dies, but it's almost like that's in quotes, and it's not really a lived experience.
Mm.
But as a death doula, I bring in the finiteness of my experience, and that helps to instill taking more risks in my life, telling people I love you, being weird, being awkward, allowing the full expression of myself the best that I'm able to, because
Mm.
I don't know how many days I have. Despite eating well and exercising and taking care of myself, I don't know how many years I have. It could be a long life, it could be a shorter life. And so I want to know that if I have an opportunity to be on my deathbed, to look at the open gifts around my bed and not the unopened ones. And
Mm.
I think ultimately, we often fear death and fear annihilation, so we don't take those risks and we do the comfortable things in life. And that's something that's so important to who I am, is to lean into the discomfort and find my edge, because that's where I feel most alive.
Mm. So you've had a lot of experience with people that are close to death, and then passing away. When you have conversations with people that know they're going to die, what are some of the things that they say? Like, do they have certain regrets? Has that taught you? Has that informed the way that you're living today?
Yeah, it's a great question. I experience clients who are nearing their end of life as becoming really straight with themselves often, especially the clients I work with are very self-aware, conscious, um, interested in having meaningful experiences and staying present as best as possible, or cultivating a sense of presence. And so in the times that I'm supporting them, we're having conversations about what's happening for you, what emotionally, what are some of your concerns. Let's look a little bit more into what you're fearful of. What do you really desire? Some of the pieces that I support them with are through the communication with their caregivers, with their healthcare team. Maybe it's a partner or an adult child, to have the conversations that can be really challenging. So I often use my book. I wrote an end of life planning guide. That was one of the first things I did out of becoming a death doula.
Mm.
And it's an essential end of life planner that's fill in the blank. So you can write down all your wishes, all your concerns, what you want to have or don't want to have happen. And it's also an educational guide about what's available, especially for Ontario, but also beyond those borders.
Mm.
And I often reference that when working with clients to document what's really important to you and how can we make that happen. And often when there's challenges with family members about what one person wants, for example, it might be for someone to hang on, and the other person might be wanting to access medical assistance in dying and feeling that they have experienced enough pain or suffering, then that can be challenging to navigate those conversations. So
Mhm.
sometimes I help to mediate with family members to have those challenging conversations and to bring forward what's unsaid in the space.
Wow, it takes a special kind of person.
Thanks.
Tell me about your history and how did you get into this line of work?
So I was always a curious kid. I really loved to understand how things worked, and I was really curious about people. And then when my parents separated when I was about 12, I became really depressed and anxious, but I was too young to have the language for what was happening in my internal landscape. And so I was really suffering, and I suffered for a great many of years from that experience. I intimately understood what it meant to really suffer and not feel seen or acknowledged or understood. And so, fast forward many years later, in my 20s, I had supported a friend through his mom's after her death and really got to experience, oh, this is what death is like. There's this gap between the healthcare system and the funeral home, of this space of, what do we do and who do we turn to and how does this work? And I thought, I don't like how this is going. I feel like there's possibility for something much more meaningful to occur.
Mm.
And so that just stayed in the back of my mind. And then a number of years later, I had several deaths occur in a 6-month period of dear beings and people to me. And it was through those experiences that I really started to see again that feeling of witnessing someone in their dying, with people buzzing around focused on their physical care, but not attuning to their emotional care, their spiritual care, creating a plan, asking what they really want or don't want, unless it was medically related. And that really sparked in me or touched on the part of me that I recognized of not being seen or acknowledged or understood. And so I naturally leaned in and asked those questions. How are you doing? What's it like inside for you?
Mm.
What does your body feel like? What does it what's it like to have all this noise and movement? Or is there something that we can do to plan for, XYZ in the future? And I just again brought that childlike curiosity to what's happening.
Mm.
And I have a beautiful gift for this innate ability to go towards the taboo without it carrying so much weight for me,
Mm.
which I think is why I'm able to talk about death, dying, and grief and use those words with more ease than the average person.
Mm.
In addition to my personal experiences with um, loss, death, grief, depression, I think it's all guided me to this path rather unexpectedly.
Mm.
I was a chef for most of my career, for almost 20 years.
Mm.
And I did not expect to be on the path of becoming a death doula or being anywhere in the field of end of life. But I really listened to or followed the breadcrumbs and listened to my intuition and just kept taking a course here, reading a book there, really trusting that the people and opportunities on my path were guiding me to something. And here I am now, founder of the Life and Death Academy and Modern Death Care, and having some wonderful international opportunities that keep presenting. So I keep saying to the universe, if this is what I'm meant to do and this is still what's lighting me up, please continue to put those opportunities in front of me. And if I'm guided to some other way of serving that's for my highest and for the highest of others, then,
Mm.
please help guide that path.
That's a beautiful way of putting it, for my highest and the highest of others. I
Hmm.
love that. What other things are you doing? So you also have a death cafe, you're a death educator. Tell me more about that.
Sure. So I host a monthly death cafe, and that's a great opportunity for strangers from all walks of life, from all over the world, to pop into a virtual Zoom meeting and to have a discussion about the end of life, whether it's storytelling, curiosities, um, wondering what happens or what other people's experiences have been. Maybe they're working with a fear of death or have a new diagnosis. So it's a really awesome opportunity for people to come and just dip a toe in a conversation and often leave very moved and inspired and come back for many more.
Mm.
So those are death cafes. I also teach the Life and Death Academy's death doula training. So people, other doulas or aspiring doulas would come to me and say, how did you get to where you are and how did you grow your business the way you have? And in the early years, I thought I'm just sort of making this up as I go. I'm not sure how to guide your specific path. And then I would just start working with other doulas and mentoring them through my own organic process. And now I teach a group coaching for death doulas who are trained to help them build their business.
Mm.
And then I also teach the academy, which is an opportunity for people who want to learn the art of caring for the dying and for supporting not just at the bedside, but in that interim time when you have a diagnosis for perhaps months or even years, and supporting clients and their caregivers through those experiences. And then I teach workshops, home funeral workshops. Um, I have quarterly visioning and goal setting for other doulas. And I have some more exciting events coming up this year, too.
Tell me more about that.
Sure. I have a summit for death doulas. It's going to be happening this spring, and that is for professional development, for networking, to learn more about what's happening in the industry. There isn't something like this happening out in the world, and I really want to support more of this work happening, more people being supported so that they can have really transformational experiences and not have deaths like I've occurred and many have, where it feels traumatic and shocking, and there was a lack of real connection and meaning made where there's otherwise opportunities for that. And
Mhm.
so by me teaching other people to become doulas, I'm helping to reform on a much bigger scale than if I work with clients on my own.
Mhm.
And so it's really, I feel very excited to help others to attract clients and learn how to talk about money and break through their mindset of the limiting beliefs that keep them from being visible and having confidence and guiding people through this rite of passage. It, like you said, it takes a unique person to do this work. And so anyone who feels even a little bit called to this, I say explore it, check
Mhm.
it out, research being a doula, read books, take workshops, join my course, do things that will help you to be comfortable with the end of life, whether
Mhm.
it's for yourself, for your dear ones, your community, or working with clients.
Amazing. I'm going to get a little bit dark. What about people who have a family member that's experienced, say, suicide? How do you help people through that?
Yeah, suicide is often experienced with shock and trauma, and there can be PTSD experienced from that, and that can go on for months, years, or even a lifetime,
Mhm.
and that's a very natural part of having suicide as a close experience. And being with that, oftentimes when there's been a suicide, there will be reflections on conversations that were had, things that were said or done, and a lot of regret. And so, part of supporting someone who's experienced suicide or been witness to suicide is to have an opportunity to speak their experience and to move the emotion. And emotion is energy, to just keep moving it so it doesn't get stuck in the body. And sometimes I'll even go on walks with clients to just help move the energy as we're talking. Most of my sessions, though, are over Zoom or over the phone. And so moving the energy through conversation, again, looking at ways to continue that bond. Perhaps we're even doing something like creating an altar or lighting a candle daily and saying some prayers or wishes or unsaid words to this person. We're doing a lot of, well, I'm hesitant to say healing work. It is by its nature healing, but the transformation of the shock, the trauma, the fear, the anguish, the anger, to transmute that into something that is easier to live with and be with because it will journey with you.
Mhm. Tell me some of the obstacles you had to overcome as you started this journey.
Yeah, so there's been a number of obstacles. Probably the main obstacle is my internal experience. And I think this will resonate for a lot of folks because it's ourselves that get in the way of what we truly desire.
Mhm.
And so things like having fear, what ifs, self doubt, imposter syndrome, um, indecision or wondering how to make a decision or what to do as if there's the right way to do it.
Mhm.
So there's been a lot that I've overcome in such a huge way, even in just the last 2 years, especially. I've been doing a ton of shadow work, inner work, personal development because that is really what gives me the momentum in my work. And that's also a huge part, one of the main pillars of my death doula training is that we do mindset work and we work on our inner landscape, because I can give you all the steps for how to create your doula practice and how to work with clients with confidence. But unless you tend to those um, sort of inner shadows
Mhm.
that we often override, then we will continue to stay in a certain place and space in our personal life and in our businesses. So that's near and dear to me, is to continually evolve. And part of overcoming that obstacle was working with a coach. And I still work with a coach to help take me to the next level, to provide the structure and the accountability. And similarly, that's what I give to my clients, whether it's aspiring doulas or doulas who are trained, who want the additional support to grow their business. It's providing structure and accountability. And it's looking at what are some of the limiting beliefs? What is your internal dialogue? How are you talking to yourself? What sorts of words do you hear yourself saying when you feel blocked about something? And it's unpacking these pieces that help us get to the root of what's really stopping you from taking that next step.
Mhm.
The other obstacle is that I was working as a chef, as I was saying, for almost 20 years, and alongside that, working part time as a death doula. And I'm so passionate about helping other people and reforming death care that I wanted to make this my full time gig. And after taking a doula training, I didn't know how to attract clients, how to really market myself skillfully, how to grow my business. I was doing all these different things to grow my business organically, and I was spinning my wheels a bit trying to take it to the next level, and I couldn't quite piece together how to have the doula practice that I really dreamed of. And so I started working with a coach was one piece, but the other piece is that I had to summon such intense courage to take the leap and leave my chef job. And now I had a very good chef job. I was working as a private chef. I had great clients I'd worked with for 6 years. On paper, it was one of the best jobs you can have as a chef. And I was dragging my feet. I was feeling like my soul was crying out to me, saying, I want and I need more. And it was on a visceral, physical experience level that I was not feeling alive. I was going to work and just putting my time in. And it was really affecting me in my day to day, not just at work. And then I summoned the courage and I took the leap and I went full time as a death doula and death educator. And I have not looked back for not even once since. And I am
Right.
so grateful that I summoned that courage,
Mhm.
because that has given rise to me having a fulfilling, meaningful, purposeful life. And I wake up excited. I work some evenings and weekends because it's an interest. It's like a hobby
Mm.
to create content and to respond to invitations like this to be on a podcast or a guest lecture. I was on a documentary. Some filmmakers approached me a few years ago, and that was an awesome experience for one of my clients and I to have an opportunity to share the nature of what it's like to work with a client.
Mhm.
So I'm so glad I did. And it took me a long time to really go for it, because I felt like I was leaping into this open space. And then when I did, the next step appeared. And
Mm.
that's what I've really cultivated in my business, is trusting. And now with the evidence that when I take a leap, the next step just keeps appearing. So I don't have to have it all figured out. And that's something I want to instill in your listeners and audience, that you don't have to know how, you just have to know what's calling you and what's there, and
Mm.
take any micro action towards that, and to trust and surrender to there will be something else that will appear that is for your highest.
Mm. That's great advice. Who should come and see you? Is there a specific like clientele that you usually see, or can anyone come and talk to you about death?
Absolutely. So there's sort of a wide range of people that I serve. So there's folks who are healthy adults who want to plan ahead, and we use my guide to go through, what they're planning, what their wishes are, what they want to document for their end of life. Then people who have a life-limiting illness or diagnosis, they can come to me. I work with them through the navigation of what's next, how to live with an illness, how to keep living. And then there are folks who are approaching their dying time, so maybe in their last year or month of life or months of life, and I help them to be with what's happening in their body. I help them to navigate the untethering of their soul, helping them to let go and release and turn towards what's next for them. And then also with caregivers. So again, caregivers, it's we don't really have a word for it in this work, um, because not everyone is providing specifically care. A caregiver could be an estranged child, it could be a parent, it could be a neighbor or a friend or a colleague, or and so we'll just say broadly, a caregiver is someone who is supporting or near and dear to someone who's in their dying, and they are also people that I support. And actually, I'd say probably about 70% of my clients are an adult daughter who is supporting either a spouse, a sibling, and most often a parent. And I help them to navigate that journey of how to caregive, what to say, what to do, how to offer symptom management that's non medical, how to care and have those conversations, how to talk to children. There's almost always children involved.
Mm.
And then sometimes I have people who call who have been grieving and aren't sure how to transform their grief into a healthier way that they can still carry that grief, carry in their heart their love for that person while still thriving in their life. So there's quite a range of people that come to work with me,
Mhm.
and that's just my one-to-one services. And of course, folks who are aspiring to be a death doula, I support them, and people who are trained to be a death doula.
Amazing. When you talk about grief, uh, what is a healthy amount of grief? Or how do you even manage that in the best way?
What I would say healthy grieving is learning to live with loss.
Mhm.
Live with in your heart the love that you have for the person, the pain that you have. Perhaps there's anger or wishing things were another way. That can all be a part of moving forward, but you can also still thrive in your life. So you can still laugh, find
Mhm.
joy, have moments of um, ease and contentment to be able to work and have time socially, and um, and I'm careful to say this, unhealthy grieving, because everyone's journey with grief is unique,
Mhm.
and there isn't a timeline for what is healthy or unhealthy. I would say the measure is how much do you find that you can integrate the loss with living? And if you're finding that it specifically that person's death has or is impacting you doing the things you love, or even accessing joy, or taking the next steps, or making decisions, or being out in the world, then these are ways that I would love to support you in transforming that so that you can thrive and have a
Mhm.
wonderful, ease filled life as much as one can.
How would someone know that they want to become a death doula?
So, there's lots of different ways that you might have a sense that you're called to caring for someone at the end of life or their supporters. And you might notice things like your personal experience, looking at your life history. Have you had experiences with death, dying, grief, loss, perhaps even trauma that have helped you to be a compassionate, caring human, someone who has empathy? You might be someone who has had crisis situations where you've stayed very calm and grounded. Maybe you are quite skilled at regulating your nervous system, or you have even just feeling a sense of calling. You haven't had a personal experience. And some of my students have not experienced deaths, but they just have this sense that they really need to be and want to be supporting people through their end of life. And I say trust that. Trust if you're feeling called towards something as taboo as the subject of death. It's so niche that if you're feeling there's something there that I want to look into or explore, trust that and just follow the next knowing that you have,
Mhm.
whether it's a webinar or a book, conversation. and just keep nurturing that fire.
Hmm. And how do you personally live life to the fullest?
I love that. Um, I take risks. I lean into the discomfort. I find my edges and I push them. I say I love you. I call myself out when I'm not being great in my relationships or when I've been hiding out. I keep showing up when it's uncomfortable. I'm taking an improv course. I'm just like I'm going for it and doing the things that just spark an interest, and I keep following these threads, and it keeps leading me to really incredible beautiful experiences. And one of the biggest joys that I'm having lately is being in conversation with new people. So when I'm at a coffee shop or at a store or at an event, I'm someone who really welcomes people and has an opportunity for conversation. And also, one of the beautiful things about this work is that when I say I'm a death doula, I often it's like an open doorway and people share stories that are so intimate and of such depth, and I feel so connected to our humanness in
Mhm.
hearing their pain or their funny story or their um, a longing or a yearning that they have, and that is just one of the best parts of announcing to people that I'm a death doula, but also in working with clients, it can be just some of the most realist of real experiences is when people just get very straight with themselves and with me
Mhm.
about what's going on. And we cut all the small talk and just get down to the meat of it.
Mhm.
And that's like a real joy, for lack of better words. Um, it's so real. And I
Mhm.
love the authenticity and genuineness of that.
Yeah, the connection.
Yes, the
Yeah,
connection.
with people. Yeah,
Yes.
actually getting to the core or like the soul, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And we all have experienced grief in our own ways. It doesn't have to be the same stories.
Mm.
So when people share their stories of grief, we can see each other and go, like without even the words, it's like I see you.
Mhm.
I know that pain and I see you in that. Or something awkward has happened in the death and dying process and someone shares that and it's like, yeah, that's happened to me too. Or yeah,
Mhm.
I can resonate with that. Or I'm really excited, but I'm also really scared. And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what the thing is. It's like we can name it, we can resonate, we can see each other.
Mhm.
And I mean, isn't that what we all want is to feel alive and feel connection
Mhm.
and have joy and ease and peace of mind? And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
all those things and
Mhm.
more. And I can say with such gratitude that after so many years of suffering in my life, and I feel just emotional saying it because it's like just such a reprieve to have done this inner work and followed my calling and to help people and do something beyond me that I feel true ease and often have peace of mind and can access moments of joy and be on a walk and smile. And that's taken me a lot of years and a lot of work to get here. And it's like I'm also so grateful that I'm also this young and have hopefully a long life to enjoy having done a lot of this shadow work and followed my heart that a peace is possible.
Mhm.
Peace is possible no matter what's happened in your life.
What are some interesting experiences you've had surrounding death?
So I'd say, broadly speaking, that when someone is aging or has an illness and they start to share what's happening in the dream world for them, that is a really great sign that they're starting the process of their untethering. And this is a great place for loved ones to nurture these conversations. So to ask questions about, tell me more about who was there or what was happening for you? What was the quality of the feeling? What was the lasting experience or memory of that dream? What's
Mhm.
really sticking with you? And this gives us great information and is often the sign of when someone is starting their process of crossing over. And I've learned many a stories where someone was sharing, I don't think I have a lot of time left, but I'm otherwise healthy. And then they had a heart attack or were in an accident.
Mm.
And so these are things that I trust when clients are telling me things that have happened in their dream world. And I put dream in quotes because I don't actually think that this is a dream space that's in an isolated sleep environment. I do believe that this is them in a liminal space that is in the in between world.
Mm. And so, what is your opinion on death and what happens to us after we die?
Yeah, I think it's still evolving for me, but what I would say is it's a place, death is a returning home, and that this human experience is simply, or not so simply, our spiritual beings having an earthly experience. We are learning and growing our soul experience. We're gathering information. We are here to enjoy the pleasures that in this physical world that we don't experience in the spiritual world. So, for example, in this human experience, we have all these tangible things like cozy couches, and we can smell the flowers, and we can eat absolutely incredible food and have all these uh, pleasures of our senses, and all these emotions. And
Mm.
when we're in our spiritual selves or essence, we don't have these physical, tangible experiences, and we don't have access to the roller coaster of emotions that is part of the human experience. So when I hold my life and others' lives as having this drop in of quite a short time on the timeline of life, that they're here for this experience and then it's a returning home. So death doesn't feel in general terribly sad for me as a topic, or very certainly not morbid. It's something that is just as natural as birth.
Mm.
And when it's a belief for me to return to our place of home and return to the ancestors and return to our most natural form, that death is simply a facilitation of the returning home.
Mm.
And so to make that rite of passage and that threshold experience meaningful and connection filled, and to really deeply see the person and provide questions of invitation to help them rise to the occasion. And that's a choice. And so, working with clients, especially conscious caregivers and those with a lot of self awareness, it's easier to have conversations to guide them to being prepared to release and let go of the density of the human form.
Mm. And that's what you mean by untethering.
Hmm.
Okay. And so, what? Tell me more about untethering. What do you mean by that?
Sure. So, untethering one's soul is essentially thinking of the form as this very dense form that our soul or spirit or essence is inside of. And so, to help with that process, I encourage, especially family members or dear ones that might be at the bedside, to be conscious of the amount of movement that they're doing with the person when they're in their final weeks or days or hours of life. It might look like they're just sleeping or that they're unconscious, but really they're doing some deep internal work as they're untethering and preparing and going in between the worlds. And so the less movement that's unnecessary, the more it assists them to do that important work, and also being really conscious of the language we're using around them. So if
Mm.
we're saying things like, don't go, I'm not ready,
Mm.
just wait until so and so gets here, I'm not saying that that's a wrong thing to do, but to be conscious of the language we're using. Is it supportive to their experience or not? Or what is the impact of the language I'm using around them?
Mhm.
It just helps us to have more awareness and support of this threshold experience. And if we can shift our thinking that dying is a failure of the healthcare system or a failure of their body,
Mhm.
then we miss that opportunity to see this as a deeply spiritual experience, but not just experience as if it's happening to them, but a deeply spiritual practice that everyone can rise to.
Mm.
And oftentimes, clients will come to me to say, or prospective clients will say, not everyone's on board to work with a doula. Can I still work with you? And I say, absolutely. And most of the time, I'm only working with one person in a family. It may be the person who's in their dying time, but more often it's a caregiver. And helping one person can affect the whole family and friend unit.
Mhm.
Mhm.
What
Go
would
ahead.
be some of the language that is the most supportive?
Most commonly, people have heard to say, you can go, it's okay, you can let go now. And that may serve or may not. I have heard some people who have been what appears to be unconscious for days to then, when someone says that, to say, shut up, or I know, or leave me alone, or something to the effect of, like, okay, all right, already, I know I can go. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not there
You
yet.
want me out of here?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
So that can be helpful, and I think people have heard of that one more commonly. And often I have found with clients, letting them know what's happening to their nears and dears. So letting them know, their dog, for example, that it's he or she is going to be cared for by so and so, and
Mhm.
what's happening for them. For example, they went on a walk today and they are being really loved up. She's getting lots of treats and lots of cuddles, and she seems to be going through this transition with quite a bit of ease. So that really helps them to soften and not hold their
Mhm.
form so tightly.
Mhm.
And that when they are ready to let go or to release, that it just makes it a little easier.
Mhm.
And some other things are to even let them know what's happening with family members. You could even, in the earlier parts of dying, you might even come in and let them know what's happening with the weather outside. I'd leave politics or religion out of the
Mhm.
out
Mhm.
of the room,
Yeah.
but just letting them know what's happening in the external world can be of support. But then, as they're going more internally, then we just want to keep it as a more sacred space. So fewer people coming in and out of the room. We want to be conscious of the lighting. We want to be conscious of the noises and sounds. Is the person having a moment to themselves, or is someone always there?
Mhm.
And that's another piece I want to bring in, is that oftentimes people are racked with grief that they stepped out of the room for a moment and the person died. And
Mhm.
I don't know about often, but sometimes a person who is dying will wait for just the moment for them to leave so that they won't have to be there for
Oh.
their last breath. And so I often let clients know that if that happens, trust that that was part of their plan, was to
Mhm.
wait, to give you that grace, to give you that space, to allow that to happen when you weren't present. So I also, knowing that, I let clients know, give the person some space, go and have a shower or a tea, even if it's 25 minutes. Just give them a little room in case that is something that they wish, but they can't articulate to you that
Right.
that's a wish.
Mhm.
It gives them a moment to care for themselves, to take care of their hygiene, to have a meal, have a cry, be held, whatever it is they need, and also gives the person a moment to be in their internal process.
Mhm. I remember when my grandmother was close, my Oma was close to on her way out. I remember I was holding her hands and she looked at me and she looked scared.
Mhm.
And I said, "It's okay. It's going to be okay."
Mhm.
How do you help someone when they are afraid to die?
I'm glad you brought that up. I'll use that specific example. So, with your grandmother, for example, you can call in ancestors or people that they've loved or pets who have died. And that can be a process, whether that you're doing with her or on your own, to ask for their support. And essentially imagining pushing her canoe off one side of the shore and being received by the ancestors on the other.
Mm.
And so you're asking them to come in and lovingly support her transition from the physical form to her spirit form. And so that can help the person to have something that they can focus their attention on,
Mm.
to call in and speak to, whether out loud or in their mind, the people that are dear to them, to come and receive her. Sometimes people want to have prayers, or to have quotes, or meaningful words read to them, poetry, or something that has been an anchor for them in their living. And
Mm.
so we can bring these things in that can help to calm. So if someone uh, meditated quite a bit, then perhaps even offering to sit next to them in meditation and holding their hand and having a bell, or you might read scripture, or you might have a spiritual director or someone from clergy come in and have a conversation with them. So we want to draw on who they were as a person and what was anchoring and grounding for them in their life, which is a flag for you to notice those things in your living of
Mm,
how do I move through my own grief or fears? What anchors and supports me? And then we're going to draw on those things at the end of life,
mm,
whether as a caregiver or the person in their dying.
mhm,
So, talking about as much as we can before we get to the bedside about some of those fears and what happens next,
mhm,
and addressing those conversations earlier on so that we don't have a well of unsaid words. And this way, we can make more meaning, we can have more ease, especially when there's plans in place. We can know what the path we're following,
mm,
and things don't always go as planned. That's real. And sometimes people die with fear, with anger, with denial. That happens.
mm.
And there's always opportunities for invitation to lessen some of that fear, anguish, grief, etc.
Mm. Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been such an interesting conversation. I thought I was going to be crying all over the place. It's been so soothing, and you have that soothing energy about you. And I can see that the people that you support must feel that as well. So thank you for sharing what you do, who you help, and how you help. And thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for joining us today. The HUGS offer is a comprehensive guide called 30 Ways to Be Paid as a Death Doula. And you can find that on Karry's website, moderndeathcare.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, and take care.